It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and I was organizing the closet when I found it. An elegant velvet box tucked away in the back of the top shelf. My curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it, expecting to find some old keepsake. Instead, I was met with something far more shocking: a diamond necklace. It wasn't just any necklace. The design was intricate, the diamonds catching the light like tiny stars. It must have cost a fortune, and yet, I had no memory of buying it for my wife, Anna. My heart sank. Where had this come from? I tried to brush it off as I put the box back where I'd found it. Maybe it was a gift from her family, or maybe she bought it for herself as a surprise. But the nagging doubt didn't leave me. That evening, as we sat on the couch watching TV, I couldn't keep the question inside any longer. "Hey, Anna," I began, keeping my tone casual. "I found something in the closet today, a necklace. It's beautiful, but I don't remember us buying it." Anna's reaction was subtle, but I caught it. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her mug, and she glanced away, just for a second. "Oh, that," she said, laughing nervously. "It's nothing. It was a gift." "From who?" I asked, trying to sound merely curious. "Emily," she replied quickly, mentioning her closest friend. "She had it lying around and thought I'd like it. You know how she is." Her explanation made sense, but her tone didn't. It felt rehearsed, as if she had prepared for this moment. I decided to let it go, but something about the way her eyes didn't meet mine lingered in my mind long after the conversation ended. For the next week, I tried to push it aside. Anna seemed as cheerful as ever, carrying on with her usual routine, but every now and then, I'd catch her glancing at her phone with a faint smile or stepping into another room to take a call. Each time, that same unease crept in, growing louder with every passing day. The necklace sat heavy in my thoughts all week, even though I hadn't brought it up again. Anna's explanation about Emily sounded plausible, but something about her delivery nagged at me. It wasn't like her to be vague. We'd always had a relationship built on openness, or so I thought. By Friday evening, my unease had grown too big to ignore. As Anna was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a simple notification. Something work-related, probably. But when I saw her phone sitting there, unguarded, a thought crept in. What if there's more? I hated myself for even considering it, but the gnawing doubt wouldn't let go. Against my better judgment, I picked up her phone. The screen was locked, of course, but Anna and I shared everything, or we used to. I'd known her passcode for years. My hands shook as I entered it. It didn't work. A pit formed in my stomach. I tried again, slower this time, making sure I didn't mistype. Again, it didn't work. The knot in my chest tightened as I stared at the screen. Why had she changed her passcode? When had she done it? My mind raced as I placed the phone back exactly as I'd found it, my heart hammering in my chest. By the time Anna came out of the bathroom, smiling and chatting about dinner plans, I could barely keep my expression neutral. "What's wrong?" she asked, toweling off her damp hair. "You look stressed." "Long day at work," I lied, forcing a weak smile. "Just tired." She nodded, brushing it off as she got dressed. I watched her, wondering how someone I'd shared so much of my life with could suddenly feel so unfamiliar. The next morning, I woke before Anna and made coffee. As I stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street, I knew I couldn't just let this go. The necklace, the changed passcode, the hushed calls, it all pointed to something. I didn't know what yet, but I was going to find out. Later that afternoon, when Anna left to run errands, I decided to follow her. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed answers. Her car pulled out of the driveway, and I waited a few minutes before grabbing my keys and heading out. I stayed far enough back to avoid suspicion, my heart pounding as I trailed her through town. Eventually, she stopped at a small cafe on the edge of the city. I parked a block away, watching as she stepped out of the car wearing an outfit that felt different. It wasn't flashy, but it was deliberate, like she'd put in extra effort. She didn't look like she was running errands. I watched as she went inside, and a few minutes later, a man joined her. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with an ease that made my stomach twist. They sat together at a table near the window, laughing and talking as if they were the only two people in the world. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white as I tried to process what I was seeing. They didn't touch. Not yet. But there was an intimacy in the way they leaned toward each other, in the way she smiled at him. It was the kind of smile she used to reserve for me. For the first time, the doubt I'd been carrying turned into something sharper. Betrayed, I sat in my car, paralyzed, watching Anna and the man at the cafe. They were deep in conversation. Her face lit up with a brightness I hadn't seen in months. She laughed at something he said, tucking her hair behind her ear. A gesture so familiar, it made my chest tighten. I wanted to burst through the door, demand answers right then and there. But I knew if I acted on impulse, I'd give her an out. She was good with words, always had been. She'd twist the situation, tell me it wasn't what it looked like, and I'd leave with nothing but more questions. No, I needed proof, something undeniable. I grabbed my phone and snapped a few pictures from the car. They weren't great, too grainy, too far away, but they were enough to keep the anger burning inside me. I kept watching as they ordered coffee, shared a pastry, and leaned in close over the table. After nearly an hour, they got up to leave. I ducked low in my seat as they stepped outside. The man reached for her shoulder, his hand lingering for just a moment before pulling away. My stomach turned as I watched Anna smile up at him, so comfortable, so familiar. When they finally went their separate ways, him heading down the street, her getting into her car, I stayed parked for a few minutes, trying to collect myself. My head was spinning, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. It was real. I had seen it with my own eyes. But I still didn't know who he was or how long this had been going on. When I got home, Anna was already in the kitchen, humming to herself as she unpacked groceries. The sight of her, so casual, so normal, made me sick. How could she act like this? Like nothing had happened? "Hey," she said brightly as I walked in. "I picked up your favorite snacks. Thought we could do a movie night later." "Thanks," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Sounds good." The next few hours were surreal. We cooked dinner together, talked about work, even laughed at a dumb TV show. She played the part of the loving wife perfectly, and for a moment, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But then I'd remember the way she looked at him, the man at the cafe, and the doubt would come roaring back. That night, as Anna slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Who was he? How had she met him? And most of all, why? What had I done, or not done, that made her turn to someone else? I couldn't sleep. At some point, I got up, pacing the house in the dark. My mind kept going back to that velvet box, the necklace, the cafe, her laughter. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't quite fit together. But I wasn't going to stop until I had the full picture. The next morning, while Anna was in the shower, I decided to search the house. It felt invasive, wrong, even, but I told myself it was necessary. I started in her closet, combing through drawers and shelves, looking for anything that might give me answers. At first, I found nothing unusual, just clothes, shoes, and the usual clutter. But then, tucked inside a purse she rarely used, I found a receipt. It was for a high-end jewelry store in the city, dated a month ago. My heart pounded as I read the details. The necklace wasn't a gift from Emily. Anna had bought it herself, or rather, someone had bought it for her. The total was in the thousands. And the name on the receipt? It wasn't hers. It was his. I stared at the receipt, the man's name burning into my brain like a brand, Daniel Grant. It was him, the man from the cafe. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The necklace wasn't a gift from a friend. It was from him. The casual laughter, the secret smiles, the quiet phone calls, they all pointed to this man. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the receipt trembling in my hand. My thoughts raced. Who was this Daniel? How long had he been in Anna's life? My mind conjured up images of the two of them together, of her wearing that necklace for him, smiling the way she used to smile at me. The pain hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't sit still. Anger coursed through me, sharp and unrelenting. I stuffed the receipt into my pocket and left the house, barely stopping to grab my keys. I needed air, space to think. Driving aimlessly, I found myself heading toward the city, toward the jewelry store on the receipt. When I arrived, the shop was exactly what I expected. Sleek, elegant, and intimidating. The kind of place you'd walk into if you wanted to make an impression. I stepped inside, the polished floors and sparkling displays amplifying my sense of being out of place. "Good afternoon, sir." A sales associate greeted me, her smile professional. "How can I assist you today?" I hesitated, feeling a strange mix of embarrassment and determination. "I'm actually looking for some information about a recent purchase," I said, pulling the receipt from my pocket and unfolding it. "This one, specifically." Her smile faltered slightly as she glanced at the receipt, but she recovered quickly. "Let me check our records." "One moment, please." She disappeared into a back room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Minutes passed, each one stretching unbearably. Finally, she returned, holding a small tablet. "Yes, this purchase was made about a month ago. A Mr. Daniel Grant ordered it as a custom piece. Is there something wrong with the item?" "No," I said, my voice tight. "I was just curious." Her polite smile returned, but I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" "No," I said again, forcing myself to remain calm. "Thank you." As I left the store, my thoughts were anything but calm. Daniel Grant. The name rolled around in my head like a bitter taste I couldn't get rid of. He wasn't just a random guy. He had money, enough to drop thousands on a custom necklace. And he had Anna. But not for long. When I got home, Anna was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled as I walked in, her expression so casual, so normal, it made my blood boil. How could she sit there, pretending everything was fine, while she was sneaking around behind my back? I sat across from her, the weight of the receipt burning in my pocket. I wanted to confront her, to lay it all out and demand the truth. But something stopped me. It was too soon. I needed more. "Everything okay?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "Yeah, I lied," my voice steady. "Just went out for a drive." Cleared my head. She smiled again, completely unaware that her web of lies was starting to unravel. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the name Daniel Grant, repeating over and over in my mind. Who was he, really? What was his connection to Anna? I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them by sitting around and waiting for her to slip up. The next day, while Anna was at work, I decided to take a more direct approach. I opened her laptop and searched for any clues that might point me in the right direction. At first, there was nothing, but then I found an email thread buried under layers of folders. It was between Anna and Daniel. The messages weren't overly romantic, at least, not at first, but as I scrolled further back, they became more personal. Inside jokes, compliments, plans to meet. My chest tightened as I read Daniel's words, so smooth and confident, and Anna's responses, so eager and warm. The final message was from a week ago. "Daniel, I'll see you Friday at our usual spot. Can't wait to see you wearing the necklace." The usual spot. The cafe. My jaw clenched as I stared at the screen, my anger simmering into something cold and sharp. I didn't just have suspicions anymore. I had proof. Proof that Anna wasn't the person I thought she was. Proof that she had chosen someone else. But now, I had a choice to make. I could confront her right away, lay everything on the table and demand answers. Or I could keep digging, find out just how deep this betrayal went. Looking at the screen, at her messages to him, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't over. The discovery of Anna's emails felt like a slap in the face, but it also gave me clarity. This wasn't just suspicion or paranoia anymore. This was real. My wife was lying to me, sneaking around with a man who wasn't just a stranger. He was someone she trusted, and that trust was built on a foundation of betrayal. I spent the rest of that day trying to keep myself busy, but no matter what I did, my thoughts kept circling back to those emails. Daniel Grant, the necklace, the usual spot. The pieces were falling into place, but I still didn't have the full picture. When Friday rolled around, I knew I couldn't stay idle any longer. Anna had been buzzing around the house all morning, saying she was meeting a friend for lunch. She even made a point to mention that Emily might be late, which felt suspiciously like preemptive damage control. I nodded along, playing the role of the clueless husband. "Have fun," I said as she grabbed her purse and kissed me on the cheek. The moment she left, I sprang into action. I grabbed my keys and headed out, making sure to stay far enough behind her car that she wouldn't notice me. My heart raced as I followed her through the city, the tension mounting with every turn she made. Sure enough, she ended up at the cafe. It was almost funny, in a twisted sort of way. They were creatures of habit, meeting at the same spot every time, as if they thought routine would keep their secrets safe. I parked a block away and waited. A few minutes later, Daniel arrived, stepping out of a sleek black car that screamed wealth and privilege. He walked into the cafe with the easy confidence of someone who had never been denied anything in his life. I couldn't see them from where I was parked, so I decided to take a risk. Grabbing my phone, I stepped out of the car and walked toward the cafe, keeping my head down. I stopped just outside, pretending to check my phone as I glanced through the window. There they were, sitting at a table near the back. Anna was laughing, her hand resting lightly on Daniel's arm. He leaned in, saying something that made her blush. The sight of it made my stomach churn. I stepped back, my mind racing. I could walk in right now, confront them both, and end this charade once and for all. But a voice in the back of my mind told me to hold off. Not yet. There was more I needed to know. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos through the window. They weren't perfect, but they were clear enough to show exactly what was going on. My hands were shaking as I put the phone back in my pocket and walked back to my car. This wasn't just about catching Anna anymore. It was about taking control, about making sure that when the truth came out, she wouldn't have anywhere to hide. That night, Anna came home acting as if everything was fine. She even brought me a coffee, claiming she'd thought of me while she was out. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile as I took the cup. "How was your day?" she asked, sitting across from me. "Same old," I replied, keeping my tone light. "How was lunch with Emily?" Her smile didn't falter, but I noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. "Good," she said quickly. "We just caught up on a few things. Nothing exciting." "Glad to hear it," I said, pretending to scroll through my phone. Her lie hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. But I didn't call her out on it. Not yet. Later that evening, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying everything I'd seen that day. The cafe, the emails, the necklace. It all painted a clear picture. Anna wasn't just cheating on me. She was living a double life, one where I was nothing more than a convenience. But if she thought I was going to sit back and let her destroy everything we'd built, she was wrong. The next step was clear. I needed to know more about Daniel, who he was, where he came from, and why he thought he could take what wasn't his. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning, Anna left for work as usual, kissing me on the cheek and reminding me to pick up groceries on my way home. Her routine seemed so normal, so practiced, that it almost made me question what I knew. Almost. As soon as she drove off, I grabbed my laptop and began my search for Daniel Grant. It wasn't hard to find him. Someone like him wasn't exactly subtle. His LinkedIn profile popped up immediately, showcasing a polished photo of him in a tailored suit, flashing a confident smile. He was a regional director for a real estate development firm based downtown. His profile screamed success, with accolades and endorsements that made it clear he was ambitious, connected, and respected in his field. I scrolled through his public posts, most of them about business deals, philanthropy events, and leadership strategies. There was nothing incriminating, at least, not yet, but his name, his face, his world. It all felt like a punch to the gut. This was the man Anna had chosen. I dug deeper, looking for anything that would give me an edge. Social media accounts, company directories, even local news articles. Anything that could help me understand who Daniel was and how long he'd been in Anna's life. It didn't take long to uncover more. A photo from a charity gala a few months back caught my attention. Daniel was there, standing with a group of colleagues. And right beside him, in a stunning dress I didn't recognize, was Anna. Her arm was casually linked through his, her smile radiant. The caption mentioned the event being a networking night for real estate professionals and investors. She had told me she was working late that night. The pieces were starting to fit together. Their affair wasn't some spur-of-the-moment mistake. It had been building for months, woven into her life under the guise of business and friendship. But the charity gala wasn't the only connection I found. An article about a fundraiser for local schools listed Daniel as one of the sponsors. The same fundraiser Anna had mentioned attending as a work obligation just weeks ago. My stomach turned as I realized how much of her life had been a lie, how many moments we had shared that were built on falsehoods. It wasn't enough to just know who Daniel was. I needed leverage, something I could use to expose their betrayal in a way neither of them could deny. That evening, while Anna was out for another supposed meeting, I made my move. Using the information I'd gathered, I called the real estate firm where Daniel worked. Pretending to be an interested client, I asked for details about his recent projects and availability for a consultation. The receptionist was polite, confirming his busy schedule but offering to email me some background information. The email came through minutes later, containing everything I needed: Daniel's official work email, office phone number, and an overview of his current projects. I felt a small, grim satisfaction as I added this to my growing arsenal. When Anna came home later that night, she seemed tired but cheerful, chatting about how her meeting had gone well. I nodded along, feigning interest, while inside, I was boiling. "Sounds like a productive day," I said, smiling. "Yeah," she replied, leaning against the counter. "I think things are finally starting to calm down at work. It's been so hectic lately." Her lies were so smooth, so effortless. It made me wonder how long she'd been practicing them. I played along, letting her think she was still in control. But the truth was, I wasn't the same man I'd been when this all started. The doubt and confusion were gone, replaced by a cold, clear determination. Anna thought she could juggle two lives without consequence. She thought she could keep me in the dark forever. She was wrong. The next few days were a blur of planning. I kept my routine the same, acting like nothing had changed while secretly building a case against Anna and her lover. Every moment she spent smiling at me or asking about my day only fueled my resolve. I decided to go deeper into Daniel's life. Knowing where he worked wasn't enough. I needed to understand who he was, his habits, his weaknesses, and the cracks in his perfect image. It was time to see him in his element. That Friday, I called in sick to work and drove downtown to the real estate firm's headquarters. Parking in a nearby lot, I waited. Around 11 a.m., Daniel emerged from the sleek glass doors, chatting with a coworker as they walked toward a cafe across the street. From my car, I observed him carefully. His confidence was undeniable. His stride, his tailored suit, even the way he laughed with his coworker. He looked like a man who had everything under control. But he didn't see me watching. Once he returned to his office, I went inside the cafe, sat at the same table he'd used, and waited for an opportunity. I pretended to check emails on my phone, glancing up occasionally to watch the flow of employees going in and out of his building. And then it happened, a chance. A woman from the firm sat at a nearby table, talking loudly on the phone about an upcoming office event. I overheard the name of a hotel downtown, the words "Friday Night Mixer," and Daniel's name mentioned as a guest speaker. It was exactly what I needed. That evening, when Anna came home, she was in an unusually good mood. She kissed me on the cheek, poured herself a glass of wine, and sat at the table with her laptop. "Big plans this weekend?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Not really," she replied without looking up. "Just some errands tomorrow and catching up on work." The lie slid so easily off her tongue. It made my stomach churn. But I smiled and nodded, playing along. The next day, while Anna was out running errands, I prepared for what I knew would be a long night. By the time she returned home, claiming she was tired and wanted an early night, I already had my plan in motion. As soon as she fell asleep, I left the house. I knew where Daniel would be, at the hotel for his company's mixer, and I was going to make sure I saw exactly what was going on. The hotel was bustling when I arrived, the lobby filled with people in business attire. I slipped into the crowd, scanning the faces around me until I spotted him. Daniel stood near the bar, a glass of whiskey in hand, surrounded by a small group of colleagues. And then I saw her. Anna. She wasn't wearing anything flashy, but she stood out nonetheless. Her smile was bright, her laugh easy, and she leaned toward Daniel in a way that left no doubt about their connection. It was subtle but intimate, a touch on the arm, a shared look, a closeness that only the two of them understood. I stayed back, blending into the crowd, my blood boiling as I watched them. They weren't trying to hide anything, not here. In this world, surrounded by his colleagues, she was just another guest, another face in the crowd. But to me, she was my wife. I pulled out my phone and took several photos, each one more damning than the last. Anna with her hand on Daniel's arm. Daniel leaning in to whisper something that made her laugh. The way they looked at each other, as if no one else existed. The weight of their betrayal settled over me like a heavy cloud. But instead of confronting them, I slipped out of the hotel and drove home. This wasn't the time to explode. Not yet. When Anna came home the next morning, she was cheerful as ever, humming a tune as she set her purse down. "Morning," I said from the couch, sipping my coffee. "Morning," she replied, leaning over to kiss me on the cheek. "What's the plan for today?" I stared at her for a moment, taking in the woman I thought I knew. The woman who had smiled at me like this for years, while now lying so effortlessly. "Nothing much," I said, forcing a smile. Inside, I was a storm waiting to unleash itself. This wasn't over. Anna had no idea what I had seen the night before, and she certainly didn't know about the photos I now had saved on my phone. That morning, as she went about her day as if nothing had happened, I felt like I was standing in the eye of a storm, calm on the surface but waiting for the chaos to hit. For the next few days, I kept up appearances, acting like the same man she thought she could fool. I laughed at her jokes, made small talk about work, and even went out to dinner with her one evening. But underneath it all, I was simmering. Every glance at her felt like a test of my self-control. Every smile she gave me felt like a mockery of the trust we had once shared. I wanted to confront her, to throw the photos and receipts in her face and demand the truth. But I held back. I needed more than just proof. I needed a plan. That week, I decided to follow Daniel. I had already learned a lot about him, his job, his habits, his connection to Anna, but I wanted to see how he spent his time when he wasn't with her. I parked outside his office one afternoon, waiting for him to leave. Around 5:30, he walked out of the building, heading toward his car. I followed at a safe distance as he drove through the city, eventually pulling into the parking lot of an upscale gym. For the next hour, I waited, watching as he came and went. He worked out, chatted with people, and left without any fanfare. It was mundane, but it told me something important. Daniel was confident. He didn't seem to have a care in the world, as if he thought his secrets would never catch up to him. But they would. That evening, I confronted myself with a hard truth. I wasn't just angry at Anna anymore. I was angry at him. Daniel had walked into my life, taken what wasn't his, and carried on without a second thought. He had made himself a part of my marriage, and he didn't even have the decency to hide it. The rage was sharp and consuming, but it was also clarifying. I wasn't going to let him walk away from this unscathed. A few nights later, I overheard Anna on the phone. I was in the kitchen, pretending to load the dishwasher, while she sat in the living room with her back to me. "Friday night works," she said softly, her voice low. "I'll tell him I'm meeting Emily again." I clenched my jaw, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. It didn't take a genius to figure out who she was talking to or what their plans were. As she hung up and walked into the kitchen, she smiled at me, acting as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "Emily wants to do dinner Friday," she said casually. "Just letting you know I'll be out." "Sounds fun," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Tell her I said hi." "I will," she said, leaning in to kiss me on the cheek before walking away. That kiss, the audacity of it, was almost too much to bear. But instead of reacting, I forced myself to focus. Friday was my opportunity. Whatever they were planning, I was going to be there. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I reviewed the photos I had taken, the emails I had uncovered, and the receipts I had saved. I had enough evidence to confront Anna and Daniel separately, but the idea of catching them together felt too poetic to ignore. When Friday finally arrived, I watched as Anna got ready. She took extra care with her appearance, fixing her hair and putting on a dress that I hadn't seen in months. She was glowing, almost giddy, and it made my blood boil. "Don't wait up," she said as she grabbed her purse. "Have fun," I replied, my voice calm. The door closed behind her, and for a moment, I just stood there, letting the silence wash over me. Then, I grabbed my keys. I waited for Anna to leave, then grabbed the bag I had prepared, a small camera, my phone, and printed copies of the emails and receipts I had collected. Tonight wasn't just about confrontation. It was about making sure there was no way for either of them to twist the truth. I tailed her car from a distance, careful not to be seen. My heart raced as I followed her through the city, every turn confirming what I already knew. She wasn't meeting Emily. She was meeting Daniel. Her car eventually pulled into the parking lot of a private restaurant, one of those upscale places where they didn't even list prices on the menu. I parked a block away, grabbing my camera before walking toward the restaurant. Peering through the large front windows, I spotted them almost immediately. Anna and Daniel sat in a corner booth, leaning in close, their heads practically touching. They looked like a couple straight out of a romance novel, intimate, carefree, utterly oblivious. My blood boiled, but I stayed focused. I snapped photo after photo, each click of the camera a small act of defiance. They laughed, they shared appetizers, and at one point, Daniel reached across the table to hold her hand. She didn't pull away. I stayed outside until they left, following them as they walked back to Daniel's car. He opened the door for her, and she slid inside with ease, like this was their routine. Like they belonged to each other. I followed them to a nearby hotel. It was one of those boutique spots that promised luxury and discretion. My stomach churned as they walked inside, arm in arm. They didn't even look around to see if anyone was watching. I waited for a moment, then followed them in, keeping a safe distance. At the front desk, I overheard Daniel giving his name. The receptionist handed him a key, and they made their way to the elevator. My fists clenched as I watched the doors close behind them. This was it, the moment of no return. I walked up to the front desk, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hi, I'm meeting Daniel Grant. Which room is he in?" The receptionist gave me a once-over, but didn't seem suspicious. "He's in room 509, she said. "Do you need me to call up?" "No need," I said with a tight smile. "Thank you." I took the elevator to the 5th floor, my mind racing. I had planned this moment over and over in my head, but now that I was here, it felt surreal. When I reached their door, I paused, listening. I could hear muffled laughter and the clinking of glasses. They were celebrating, oblivious to what was coming. I knocked. The laughter stopped. A moment later, the door opened, and Daniel stood there, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Yeah," I said coldly, pushing the door open further. "You can explain why you're with my wife." Anna appeared behind him, her face going pale. "Ethan," she stammered, "what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I echoed, my voice rising. "The better question is, what are you doing here?" The room was silent except for the ticking of a nearby clock. Anna looked like a deer caught in headlights, while Daniel tried to regain his composure. "Look, man, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he began. "Don't," I snapped, cutting him off. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I had taken at the restaurant and hotel. "Does this look like a misunderstanding to you?" Anna's eyes widened as she saw the pictures. "Ethan, it's not what it looks like," she said quickly. "I can explain." "Don't insult my intelligence," I said, my voice cold. "I've got emails, receipts, and photos. I know everything, Anna. Every lie, every excuse. You've been sneaking around with him for months." Daniel raised his hands defensively. "Hey, man, let's keep this civil." "Civil?" I said, turning to him. "You're sleeping with another man's wife, and you want civility?" Anna stepped between us, her voice shaking. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen like this." "How did you mean for it to happen?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just planning to live this double life forever?" Anna started crying, but I wasn't moved. Her tears felt manipulative, a last-ditch effort to regain control. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said softly. "But you did," I replied, my voice steady. "You destroyed everything we built together." Daniel tried to step in again, but I shot him a glare. "This has nothing to do with you. Stay out of it." He raised his hands and backed away, clearly uncomfortable. "Good. He should be." I turned back to Anna. "You made your choice. Now, You'll have to live with the consequences. When I got home that night, I started putting my exit strategy into motion. I called a divorce attorney first thing the next morning, explaining everything. My lawyer was sharp and ruthless, promising to make sure Anna got as little as possible. I also started preparing myself emotionally. The betrayal had cut deep, but I wasn't going to let it define me. I threw myself into work, into hobbies I had neglected, into rebuilding the confidence Anna had chipped away at over the years. But I wasn't done with her or Daniel that a few weeks later, I started seeing someone. She was a coworker I had always gotten along with, and our connection felt effortless. I didn't go into it expecting anything serious, but spending time with her reminded me of what it felt like to be appreciated. When Anna found out, likely through mutual friends, she called me, furious. "How could you move on so quickly?" she demanded. "Why does it matter to you?" I replied calmly, "You moved on months ago." Her silence was telling. She wanted control, even now, but I wasn't giving it to her. The divorce was finalized months later. Anna tried to fight for the house, for alimony, for everything she could get, but my lawyer shut her down at every turn. By the end of it, she was left with little more than her belongings and the realization that her affair had cost her everything. As for Daniel, he disappeared from her life not long after the confrontation. I heard through the grapevine that his company frowned on employees who caused scandals, and he had been quietly let go. I stood on my porch the day the final paperwork arrived, looking out at the life I was rebuilding. Anna's betrayal had broken something in me, but it had also set me free. I wasn't the man I used to be, naive, trusting, blind to the red flags. I was stronger now, sharper, and ready to face whatever came next. In the end, they didn't break me. If anything, they made me better.